Hey everybody, it's Natalie Barnes here from Beyond the Reef again, and you are on day 6. I can't believe it, 6 out of 7 days of sewing, and you guys have hung in there and done each and every day. I think you're going to find that by doing this, you realize that no matter what you're working on, if you just give yourself maybe an hour a day, you can really get a lot done. So tomorrow's going to be our last day of blocks. And then we're going to take a lay day. Sunday's going to be our day off to either do some gardening, like I mentioned earlier, or maybe just do a little catch up if somehow you got behind on some of your blocks. So Monday will be the big reveal. I want to thank all of you for joining in and for being a part of this sew along. What I realized is we haven't really been sewing along. So rather than completing this block, I made the pieces and I thought I would just hang out with you guys and sew a little bit. So I've got the 2 pieces here and I'm gonna put some pins in this because I really want to make sure that I'm accurate about my sewing. One of the things that I tell every single class that I teach is that really a project is going to take a certain amount of time. It's just always going to take X amount of time. And whether you spend this amount of time of cutting accurately, and then this amount of time of sewing, and this amount of time of quilting, you always end up with the same amount of time. So, as an example, if you are going to cut quickly, you're going to make up for it in sewing slower because you'd have to rip things out, you'd have to rearrange things. If you cut accurately, then you're going to have less time sewing, but ultimately you're always going to take the same amount of time. So whatever machine you're working on, make sure you're familiar with your exact 1/4 inch seam. Take 3 1.5 by 3.5 inch cut strips, accurately cut strips, and test yourself and see if you really know where your 1/4 inch seam is. It's just a matter of how many times you really want to sew the same seam. And you know the old saying, never rip a seam when you're still mad at yourself for sewing it. So those are my 2 bits of information that I have for you. I'm going to pull this just a little bit closer and sew through these. I've pinned, but as I go along, I'm going to make sure that I'm taking those pins out. I'm on my trusty HD9 by Janome. It's a mechanical machine, and it is a straight stitch machine. It's a bit of an industrial machine as well, HD for heavy duty, and it's one of those heads that actually will sew very, very quickly. Although I'm not sewing quickly because, again, it's that concept of we only have this amount of time. So do I want to make up for the sewing quickly by ripping and sewing twice, or do I just want to get this correct? So I'm pulling my seams out. This has a nice big throat here, so I usually put my pins right there when I'm working on things. And then one of the things that I got very spoiled about, normally I would reach over, grab my little leader here, and then sew back onto it. But this machine actually has a little thread cutter on it, and I've really been getting spoiled with that. Now see, this came out just fine. And I'll press this later on, but it's good. And let me get the other piece put on here, and I'm going to throw some pins in on this too. And now we can officially call it a sew along because we're sewing along together, I hope. But, you know, I have to tell you that my guild, that I am thankfully a member of, I actually happen to be artist in residence the first year for the Modern Quilt Guild in Long Beach. They have been doing Zoom sew-alongs, and they just get together and they just all get on Zoom and they sit there and they just sew, and someone will get up and go press something and come back, and then somebody else will go and have to feed the dog and come back, but they dedicate that time to being together and sewing together. So I'm going to ask you for the giveaway this week, this day, how many of you have had Zoom classes? And the real question is, I want you to add them up. So from March 2020 until, until now, until third week in August, how many Zoom classes did you attend? And the person with the most Zoom classes will win a half-yard bundle of Marion Mod fabrics, all 12. So I posted another quilt that actually a friend, Kim King, made. I'm wondering if you saw that one. It was, she has kept it at her house, so I don't have it, but it was Snowflake. And so I thought that was just a beautiful, beautiful quilt that she did, and I wanted to share it with all of you. Just about done here. Okay, now I'm going to use a thread cutter. I just think this is the coolest thing ever. And one thing that I found, the needle up position and the thread cutter is perfect for doing quilt as you go. So if you're making if you're doing quilt as you go, maybe a cover for your machine, or little coasters are great. I like to do a bag for a bottle of wine and then coasters as a thank you gift. And so quilt as you go, needle up position, and that is just golden for quilt as you go. Okay, let's see how I did here. Pretty, oh, good, good. Everything turned out just fine. I think it was the pinning. I'm gonna do a little, just, it's so humid, I'm just gonna press it with my hands, because I'm not used to the humidity here. Okay, and then we're gonna add this into the mix. Where can we put it? We'll add it over here. And we only have one more day left, so I have to ask all of you, what do you think it is? Can you tell by all the parts and pieces? I hope you can't, because you know, that's the whole goal of a mystery, is to make sure you can't. So we've got some pieces here with some more of these large 4-inch squares. But we've got large 4-inch squares in here too. A whole group of large 4-inch squares here. And then I did hang another little wall hanging that Zena of Zany Mouse Creations made, which was a beautiful piece. And Teresa Silva does a beautiful job of quilting all of the samples, and we really appreciate her for that. I think that's it for today. You have made it through day 6. You've only got one more day left. One more day of a block left, and then the big reveal. One thing I want to remind you is please be mindful of the fabrics that you're selecting, and make sure that you're using the same fabrics that are on the actual handout. And I think you have done that. We talked about doing that on day 1, so I'm hopeful that you've been doing that. And that is just a matter of making sure that when you put it all together again, that you don't have 2 of the same fabric directly adjacent to each other. So I think that's going to be good. I also think that there was a typo in the first cutting instructions that I sent to you, and that is for this, the green and the gray and white snowball. I think you're actually going to need 9 of those instead of 8. So that shouldn't be too big of an issue. Otherwise, that's it for housekeeping here. I just wanted to say thank you again for being a part of the sew along, and really appreciate it. And if you like our content, please follow our Instagram page, and the YouTube channel, of course, you can always subscribe to. So thanks again, from my house to yours.